All right, this video is going to be on lines and strokes, right? How do we draw a line and then how do we style that line? That's the stroke. The stroke is the thing that gives us our visual look of our line. There's a lot of tools in Adobe Illustrator to produce lines. So let's look at a couple of them and we'll look at all the intricacies because honestly, lines and strokes are probably one of the most complicated thing within Illustrator for a beginner. First, I'm going to go ahead and select over here this line segment tool. We're going to largely ignore these tools. I find them of limited use, occasional use. But a line segment tool, right, just draws these straight lines here. Okay, and if you notice, it's drawing them for me. It has no stroke applied to it. Whenever you see this black or this red thing, it means transparent or nothing, right? But they're there. If you see, if I drag out with my black arrow, I can see that they're there. So I need to make a fill for them. This one says black. I notice this one sometimes has some issues right here. See, it's not actually applying it. So what I do is these right here you can apply no stroke. You can click on this right here and then hopefully it should give us the ability to do that. There we go. It made that. Another thing that you could do is when drawing a line, you kind of want to be aware not to have a fill on it unless you really want it, and I'll show why that is once I'm drawing with a non-straight tool. But if you're having trouble with changing this stroke right here, up here in the palette, right, we can get all of our same color tools here. So I can make a black stroke right there. But we don't need that right there. So let's look at some other tools that we have. Well, first thing to know about this stroke tool is that if we hold shift, it'll constrain me to only being able to draw in 45-degree increments. Okay, as you see it like kind of pre-drawing before it commits it when I release. So that's of limited use, right? That's if I need to make a straight line. The other tool I'm going to suggest that you use a lot is this pencil tool. It's behind the shapeshifter tool here. The quick key to get to it is N. And the pencil tool is simply like, hey, look, I can just draw out any kind of crazy abstract line here, right? So that's a handy tool. A lot of times you'll want to actually close a line. So if you draw it and as you get to the end, you'll see your little cursor turn to a circle, and that will mean that it's going to complete that shape. So now we have this line, which is actually now just a kind of a circular shape. Let me go ahead and just remove, let me go ahead and remove one of these just so that we have one so that we can talk about fills on line. So we'll be using these fills and you'll be making shapes and we're only going to work in black and white for the first part of this class, but for this example I'm going to show you that when I fill it, you'll notice, you see this unclosed line, it can still take a fill. So you want to be aware that you don't have any fill there, even a white fill, because a white fill it'll still be there, so you want to make sure you have no fill on if you just want a line. So now there's some other important things to know about lines, and that's the stroke palette is probably one of the most important things, right? So we need to put our line weight, right? How thick is our line? So we can go in and modify this line weight here, and you see my line getting thicker. Now I'm going to stop and talk about one of the most kind of frustrating features of Illustrator and lines. So if I have this line, I really like this, and I want the thickest. Now I have this as part of a larger drawing, and I want to resize everything down. So I'm going to resize it down, and you'll notice that it stays at that same font weight that we had. I'm down here at 16. I'm up here that it's 16. But a lot of times what you want is for it to scale the stroke. So if I make the thing 50% smaller, I want my stroke 50% smaller. So you have to, when in that context, you have to actually go over to Adobe Illustrator Preferences General. And in general, you'll see this checkbox right here for Scale Strokes and Effects. Hit OK. Watch this right here. This is at 16. I'm going to bring this down. And look, now it's at 8.45. So that's something you have to be aware of as you're resizing. There's times where you want that, and there's times when you don't. I usually leave it off until I actually want it, because there's a lot of times when I'm first drawing a shape, I know kind of the line width I want, but it gets complicated. So, whoops, I just left it on. I would suggest leaving it off, but knowing that it's there. Okay, so we have this line here. Let's look at some other properties. You'll see that there's a cap. So when I draw a line in Illustrator, right, the ends have the cap right here. So you see I can toggle that, and you'll notice the changing type of endpoints, right? For most purposes, this is usually fine, but sometimes just to polish a line or something, I'll make sure I put like a round cap on it. We'll leave it off though. Corners, these are more for, well, I guess this is for the lines as well. So if you see here, it's kind of a sharp corner here. Oh, I wanted to make it more circular, so I can do this. This is a miter. I don't know if you'll ever use that. The line and the stroke only really works on a shape that has a line stroke on it. But a dashed line you'll use, right? So you can see here, I just happen to have some settings I was playing with before, but we can change the dash and gap pattern of my line thing. This takes just experimenting until you get what you want. Oops, and if you don't have it selected, it doesn't really help. You have to have your object selected when you're changing these things, right? So if you just put in 4, a dash of 4, it'll just kind of take that as the gap thing. I'm going to take off that dashed line. Occasionally, maybe for an infographic project way at the end, you'll want to add an arrow to it. This arrow here, you see, I can add a left arrow or a right arrow. Limited use again. And this right here is what type of kind of pen tool are you using to draw this line. And I usually don't ever use it there. I'll go back up to the top here. See, and we can actually do the stroke here as well. There's a lot of redundancy. But I'll do it over here. See, this is the different types of, say, pen nibs, if you've ever done any calligraphy. So I can do something like this and apply this type of pen nib. What I will use over here, though, is sometimes, say, it applied it and, right, all that weight is over here and it's really thin up here, but say I wanted to make it look like as if I drew it going the other way with a pen nib. So I'll just go down to the strokes palette, and you'll see this where I'm able to flip it along, and I flip it left to right. Now again, we don't have to use a lot of these. I mean, occasionally during our walk a line project, you'll maybe use these. There's also these brush styles. Brush styles, generally, I use the pen. There's a brush tool as well. So there's a brush tool, and I draw it out, and I make sure I have it selected, and I can go ahead and apply some kind of a brush fill. And now you can go online, you just Google, free Illustrator brushes, and get all different kinds of lines. Can be super useful for your purposes, right? So you don't have to actually illustrate it, or you want to add a certain amount of effect to a line, right? We talked about all the attributes of line and how they feel. And so that's how you do that. You're just going to have to Google Adobe Illustrator line, and then there's usually 2 types of brushes you'll find online. One where you have to open a folder and save the lines then, and others that give you this special file that you have to actually put in a subfolder of the application on your computer. So again, I'm just going to refer you to online tutorials because I don't know which type you're going to get. That's pretty much lines in a nutshell, right? One thing I will say is that you can also pick up a line. So say I get this, if you notice my cursor is right on the end of that line, you'll see this little slant come up. If I go ahead and draw from there, I've just connected this line, and if I have a stroke fill like I do, right, it kind of updates it to make it seem like, oh yeah, I remember, I put that on and do that, right? So that is pretty much everything you need to know about lines and strokes.